welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are wading into possibly the deepest, most complex pool of mythology we've ever tackled here.
Definitely complex.
We're really not looking at simple history today. We're digging into something more like a cosmic, cyclical tragedy.
Yeah.
It's baked right into the foundation of existence itself, the history of the lands between.
That's right. And our mission really is to try and cut through all that fractured lore, the stuff delivered across tons of sources, and piece together a clearer chronological narrative.
Yeah, make sense of it all.
Exactly. We're focusing hard on those core philosophical struggles like unity versus individuality, and the big secret behind the age of the Erd Tree, how Queen Marika's golden order wasn't exactly a lasting divine gift.
More like something else.
More like an incredibly complex, meticulously engineered system that seems maybe designed from the very start for self-destruction.
Wow, okay. Yeah, some of these sources, they read like, I don't know, theological texts mixed with cosmic horror notes. It's dense stuff.
It really is.
But we're going to try and unpack the architecture of this divine machine. So here's the key question we want to answer for you today. What actually happens when a system that looks divine is set up by God who's basically absent, and then it's run entirely by vassals who are frankly abandoned and pretty traumatized? We're tracing a history that's really defined by its creators just vanishing. Okay, so to really get the politics and the persecution that happens later under the Golden Order, we first have to talk about what came before. Before time even, before anything really existed.
The absolute origin point. The One Great.
The One Great. What was that?
Well, the One Great is more than just prehistory. It's like the ultimate philosophical baseline for the lands between. Sources describe it as the state of primordial unity, a singularity.
Okay, like everything together.
Exactly. Pre-creation wholeness. And crucially, it was totally devoid of individuality, no souls, no life, no death, just pure unified potential, undifferentiated.
Which means that the very act of being an individual, of existing separately, is seen by some groups as the original cosmic sin, right?
Precisely. The second the One Great fractured suffering began, that's the core belief.
So if you follow that logic, the logic of the extreme unity faction, the Frenzied Flame.
Yeah, their whole goal makes a certain kind of sense. For them, differentiation is suffering. So their goal isn't really malice or conquest in the usual sense. It's about ultimate resolution.
Resolution how?
They want to return the entire universe to that original, painless singularity. The sources say, melt it all away until all is one again. The idea is to end the immense unbearable suffering that they believe existence and individuality inherently bring.
So the birth of the universe then wasn't some gentle, let there be light kind of thing?
Not at all. The lore describes it as catastrophic, a violent sundering, a great rupture across the skies. It reads less like creation and more like demolition.
And who gets the blame for that?
Well, the Frenzied Flame, speaking through the three fingers specifically, they're very clear. They blame the greater will.
The main God.
The main outer God, yes. They call the act of creation a fundamental mistake. They argue that by creating fractures and births and souls, the greater will introduced all suffering. They say torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake.
Wow. Okay, so that sets up the core ideological battle for the entire setting, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's not just kings fighting, it's this huge cosmic debate. You've got the greater will pushing order, structure, the value of the individual soul.
And on the other side, the Frenzied Flame pushing for, chaotic unity, anything to end suffering.
And what's really fascinating, you mentioned this before, is this symbolism that suggests these two cosmic forces maybe aren't totally separate enemies.
Exactly. If you look at the lore around the two fingers who represent order and the three fingers who represent frenzy, well, they often combine to form a complete five-fingered hand.
Ah, okay. So they're not like opposing creations, but maybe two different principles that came from the same source during that big violent rupture.
That seems to be the implication, like two different consequences of the same initial divine explosion, maybe. The conflict is baked in because the principle of order, the greater will, it can't fully extinguish that desire for primal unity, the frenzied flame, because maybe they're two sides of the same coin.
Which guarantees this constant cyclical struggle. It's not good versus evil, it's just inherent conflict.
Right. But let's look at how the greater will actually tried to set up its version of order in the lands between. It didn't show up itself. It sent envoys.
Which brings us straight to that idea of abandonment you mentioned, the thing that defines the Golden Order.
Right. The first envoy we know about was Metyr, the Mother of Fingers, described as a magnificently gleaming daughter. She seems to be the progenitor of the communicators, the 2 and 3 fingers themselves. Her job was setting up the connection, the sort of theological framework.
Okay, the communications hub.
Yeah.
And the second, envoy.
That was the muscle, the enforcement, a golden star bearing a beast, which became the Elden Beast.
The final boss.
The final boss, yeah. But more than that, it's the living incarnation of the concept of order. It's not just a creature, it's like a manifestation of law, almost like a programmable entity.
Okay, so comms and enforcement sent. Then what?
And here's the kicker. The really crucial, tragic detail that basically defines the entire Golden Order.
Right.
After sending these to the communication system and the living law, the greater will just stopped talking.
Stopped, like, completely.
Completely withdrew, ceased all further communication. It sent a pre-programmed mandate and then essentially ghosted the entire universe.
Wow, so the whole Golden Order is built on just being left behind.
Exactly. That's the major insight, I think. It's not this constantly guided empire. It's a self-perpetuating system run by abandoned vassals, the Fingers, the Elden Beast, who are just endlessly trying to follow these old pre-programmed instructions that never get updated.
Which would mean those long periods where the 2 figures just stand there consulting.
They're probably futile attempts to get back in touch, right? Trying to reestablish contact with a god that's been silent for millennia. They're waiting for a signal that's just never going to arrive.
Okay, and that completely reframes Marika's rebellion later on, doesn't it? Her shattering the ring wasn't just like a sudden betrayal.
No, it reads more like this crushing, agonizing realization that she was trapped. A vessel stuck inside this system of absolute control, this metaphysical machine that had no active operator. No one on the other end of the line, just obsolete code running itself.
Okay, moving forward in time then. Long before the clean golden glow of the Erd tree we see in the game, there was another huge tree, right? The Great Tree.
Yes, the Great Tree. And an era governed by this really chaotic, vibrant, primordial power called the Crucible.
The Crucible. Why is that so important?
It's profoundly important because it represents the first sort of physical manifestation of life energy after the One Great was fractured. It's described as the primordial form of the Erd tree. But it wasn't neat or structured. It was a chaotic melange of life energies. The key phrase is, all life was once blended together.
Blended together, resulting in that organic chaos, yeah. We're talking about creatures that naturally had, like, all sorts of features mixed together.
Yeah.
Horns, scales, feathers, wings, tails.
Exactly. These weren't mutations or aberrations. They were just the natural common products of the world at that time.
And here's the first big point of historical conflict, isn't it? Because back then, those features weren't seen as bad.
Not at all. They were revered. Seen as signifiers of the divine, manifestations of the Crucible's sacred raw vitality. The people who worship the Crucible, the horn scent, they truly believed these blended energies would connect the world back to the gods.
So the omen of the misbegotten, the characters we see who have these features, they were just normal back then.
They were the natural denizens of that world, yeah. Products of the Crucible's energy.
Okay, so the Crucible is this chaotic, free-form life energy. But was that the first attempt at order? Or was something else going on? Because you also have the Dragon Dynasty, right? Ruling from Farum Azula.
That's a really crucial point. The Dragon Dynasty seems to have been the first iteration of the order that the Elden Beast established, contemporaneous with, or maybe even before, the height of the Crucible.
So Placidusax.
Dragon Lord Placidusax, yeah. He held the title Elden Lord in the age before the Erd Tree. He ruled alongside a god, his consort, who mysteriously later fled.
Fled, there's that theme again. A god leaves, abandons their chosen vessel. Placidusax is literally waiting beyond time for his god to come back.
It just reinforces this idea of destructive, repeating cycles of abandonment, and we have physical proof. The Elden Ring sigil, it's found in Farum Azula. It's the oldest known depiction.
Ah, so that proves the Dragon Dynasty was the first time this system, Elden Lord, Divine Vessel, the ring's power, was put in place.
Exactly. Marika didn't invent the Elden Lord concept. She just took over after a previous version failed or was abandoned.
Which leads us straight into the rise of the Golden Order and how it had to basically rewrite history violently.
Oh, absolutely. If the Erd Tree was going to be the supreme singular power, it couldn't just coexist with the messy, diverse biology and beliefs of the Crucible era, or the memory of the Dragon's Order.
So how did they do it? How did they erase that history?
Systematically. Brutally efficiently, it seems. Marika's system couldn't tolerate the Crucible's celebration of chaos and blending, so they did a complete metaphysical rebranding. They took those features that were once seen as divine, the horns, the scales, the chails, and declared them impure, curses, marks of defilement.
That's quite a switch, taking a divine marker and turning it into the worst possible thing, a sign of being monstrous.
And it served a very powerful political purpose, didn't it? It gave them the theological justification they needed for persecuting, subjugating, and eventually enslaving the Omen, the Misbegotten, and the remaining Hornsent.
Right. The Omen were locked away beneath the capital, the Misbegotten used as slaves. Their only crime was basically existing in a way that contradicted the Golden Order's demand for sterile, singular purity.
Exactly. Their biology became heresy.
So the age of the Erd Tree, which seems like the start of history in the game, it's really just the latest chapter.
Yeah.
And it's built on violently erasing everything that came before it.
Okay, let's pivot now to the architect herself. Queen Marika. We can't really grasp her motivations, her obsession with purity, without understanding where she came from.
Absolutely. She was Numen, a race distinct from the sort of baseline humans of the lands between, often linked with longer life, maybe closer ties to outer gods. And her people, the shamans, they settled in the land of shadow.
And crucially, they weren't welcomed there.
No. This is where we find the source of Marika's driving force, deep formative trauma. Her people, the Numen, were brutally oppressed, victimized by the very Crucible worshippers, the Hornsent, that she would later go on to purge. We should probably linger on the specifics of that horror, because it really does seem to justify the extreme nature of her later actions, doesn't it?
It's pretty horrific. The sources describe the Numen being subjected to these torturous rituals by the Hornsent, including being literally stuffed into giant stone jars.
Stuffed into jars? Why?
The grotesque purpose seems to have been an attempt to forcibly meld beings together, a twisted, horrifying attempt by the Hornsent to achieve some kind of forced divinity by mimicking the Crucible's blending power.
Wow. Okay. That kind of visceral horror, being victimized by the people who celebrated chaotic life blending, you can see how that would forge a lasting hatred.
Absolutely. A hatred for the Hornsent, for the Crucible, for everything that represented that chaotic, uncontrolled state. Her entire empire, the Golden Order, you can almost read it as a colossal trauma response.
Obsessive need to impose clean, sterile, singular order on a messy world that had profoundly wronged her.
Exactly. The Golden Order, with its absolute insistence on unblemished divinity, its systematic persecution of the Omen and Misbegotten, who are the biological descendants of that Hornsent culture, it feels like a direct metaphysical construct designed to eradicate the culture and biology of those who victimized her people.
So before Marika could impose this monolithic rule, the lands between was actually pretty diverse, right? Pluralistic.
Very much so. You had the fire giants up north worshipping their fell god, tending the flame of ruin, which was critical, as it held the power to actually burn the Erd Tree.
The ultimate threat to her order.
Precisely. Then you had the Zamor, these ancient warriors worshipping winter and ice, and the astrologers studying the stars, who'd apparently been banished underground by the greater will itself for daring to look beyond its singular authority.
So Marika's rise to power, becoming Empyrean, the vessel for the Elden Ring. It wasn't about unifying a peaceful land.
Not at all. It was a conquest born of necessity. She had to eliminate or subjugate every rival power structure that could possibly threaten the Erd Tree's existence or the Greater Will's sole authority.
Like the war against the giants, led by Horalu, who she renamed Godfrey. That was purely existential, isn't it?
Absolutely critical. Neutralizing the flame of ruin was step one for survival. Without that, the whole project was doomed. Marika herself is even credited with slaying the fell god, sealing its essence away inside the last surviving giant.
Okay, so theological and military rivals dealt with. Then Marika makes her biggest move. The metaphysical coup, as you call it.
Yes. Before the Golden Order could truly be locked in, she had to defeat the Gloam-eyed Queen, another Empyrean commanding the Godskin Apostles, wielding the Black Flame.
Which came from the Rune of Death itself.
Exactly. The power to kill gods. After defeating her, Marika performed the single most world-altering act of her entire reign. She commanded her shadow Malekith.
Her half-brother, yeah.
Her loyal shadow-bound beast, yes, commanded him to physically pluck the Rune of Death, destined death, right out of the Elden Ring and seal it away, inside his own flesh.
What did that do? Removing the concept of true death.
It had radical, far-reaching consequences. Instantly, it established the Golden Order's central pillar. All souls, when the body died, would return to the Erd Tree for rebirth, a closed cycle.
Immortality for her line.
Immortality for her lineage, yes. But more importantly, it seized absolute monopolistic control over the very concept of existence. She defined the terms of life and death for everyone.
She basically replaced the natural messy cycle with an artificial controlled one that only her family benefited from. That's defining reality itself.
It's the ultimate power move. But crucially, it contained the seeds of its own failure. By removing true final death, she introduced stagnation, rot, decay. She created this perfect, sterile environment that was completely unable to cope with conflict, corruption, or, well, actual decay. The system was now mathematically guaranteed to break down the moment something reintroduced the concept of permanent death back into the equation.
Okay, so the foundation's set. Marika establishes her golden lineage with Godfrey as the first Elden Lord. But the cracks appear almost immediately, don't they? Even her own children carry the chaos she tried to purge.
Right. Godfrey himself, the great champion, had to literally wear a lion regent, Sarosh, on his back just to contain his primal battle lust.
And their children.
Yeah.
Besides Godwyn the Golden, you get the Omen twins, Morgott and Mog.
Born with horns, tails, the very signs of the Crucible she despised. Their births were a huge secret, right? They had to be imprisoned beneath the capital to maintain that facade of purity.
So she's persecuting her own kids to keep up appearances. And then once Godfrey has done his job, defeated all the major external threats, she executes this incredibly complex long game move, the exile.
Yeah, she strips Godfrey and his entire army of their grace, turns them into the first Tarnished, and sends them out of the lands between, telling them to live and die in the real world, the one with the true death she'd abolished.
Which wasn't just punishment. You're saying this was deliberate, tactical.
Absolutely seems that way. She was creating an army in exile, warriors who would be hardened by actual death, actual consequence, things no one inside the Golden Order could experience anymore.
Why? Why would she need that?
She needed an external force, a seasoned agent of change, completely separate from the stagnating, deathless system she'd built, to serve as her weapon later when the Order was finally ready to break. She was planning the demolition from the start.
Wow, okay. Fast forward then. Godfrey's gone. Radagon steps in as the new Elden Lord. But the big secret is Marika and Radagon
are two halves of the same being, one god split.
How does that even work?
It's it's divine mystery, isn't it? But functionally, it guaranteed the Order would collapse from the inside. You had Marika, the half-seemingly plotting rebellion, growing to hate her role as this vessel in an abandoned system.
And then Radagon.
Radagon, the leal hound of the Golden Order, fanatically loyal, trying desperately to preserve the very system Marika intended to shatter. These two opposing wills stuck in one body. The godhead itself was tearing itself apart.
And their children together just highlighted the decay, didn't they? Miquella and Malenia, both Empyreans, potential successors.
But both afflicted with these terrible curses. Miquella cursed with eternal youth, unable to mature, and Malenia cursed with the scarlet rot.
The rot, that feels significant, like a direct counter to the Golden Order's sterile purity.
It really does. It's this slow, creeping, biological return to chaos and putrefaction. So the system's rotting from the inside, but it needed an external shock to really kickstart the collapse. Which brings us to Ranni.
Ranni the Witch. Her plan. The Night of the Black Knives. This was the immediate catalyst.
It seems so. A meticulously planned event, orchestrated by Ranni because she desperately wanted out of her destiny as just another pawn for the silent greater will.
And her plan was intricate.
A metaphysical masterstroke, really. Designed to inflict a wound the Order couldn't heal, it involved stealing a fragment of the Rune of Death from Malekith.
How did she manage that?
That's a good question. The details are murky. But she got it. Imbued daggers with destined death. And crucially, she used the Black Knife Assassins. All female, all Newman, Marika's own race.
Which strongly suggests Marika might have been complicit, helped facilitate the plot against her own system.
The implication is definitely there. This wasn't just murder, it was a precise ritual, designed to create a paradox that the Golden Order's rigid, sealed logic just couldn't compute.
The paradox being?
On that night of wintry fog, two demigods died, but differently. Breaking the curse mark of death into two halves, Godwyn the Golden was killed in soul alone.
Leaving his body alive.
Alive but soulless. Corrupted, left to decay at the roots of the Erd Tree. At the same time, Ranni used the ritual to kill her own flesh, her original body.
Allowing her soul to escape the Order's control.
Exactly. Her soul endured unbound, later finding refuge in that dull body we see.
Okay, why that specific split? Death of soul, death of flesh. Why was that necessary? Was she deliberately exploiting the Order's inability to process, like, half a death?
It really looks that way. The Golden Order was built on the idea that death was this singular concept that had been sealed away, controlled. By breaking the curse mark into two distinct, non-reproducible halves, she created a metaphysical injury that the Elden Ring, the fundamental law of reality, couldn't fix or even understand.
And the consequence was huge. Godwin's soulless body at the Erd Tree's roots.
Couldn't return to the cycle of rebirth. It wasn't dead, it became something else entirely. The Prince of Death. Spreading death root, giving rise to those who live in death zombies, skeletons.
Things totally outside the Golden Order's rules.
Completely contradictory to its sealed existence. The ultimate irony, right? The order built to control death was ultimately broken by a stolen piece of death. Used to create a form of undeath it was utterly incapable of processing.
And Marika, seeing this fatal wound, used her own son's horrific fate as the justification.
As the emotional and political fuel to take her final destructive step.
So right after Godwin's corruption starts spreading, Marika makes her move. Smashes the Elden Ring with her hammer.
Bang! The central law, broken. We're told Radagon, the loyal half, desperately tried to put it back together.
I couldn't.
Couldn't. The metaphysical damage from Ranni's plot, the paradox of Godwin's death, it was just too deep. The ring was fundamentally broken.
And for this ultimate act of blasphemy, destroying the Greater Will's law.
The Greater Will, or maybe just the Elden Beast acting on its programming, imprisoned her, trapped the fractured God Queen inside the Erd Tree.
But not before she set one last thing in motion. She incited her children to war.
Yes. Her last command, essentially. Make of yourselves that which ye desire, be it a lord, be it a god. Basically, permission to tear the whole thing down.
Permission to betray the system.
Yeah.
And the demigods that grabbed the shards of the ring, the great runes.
But the sources say the mad taint of their newfound strength just amplified all their existing flaws, drove them into civil war. This wasn't some noble war of succession. It was petty, personal madness fueled by raw power.
So the runes acted like amplifiers.
Exactly. They took Godric's insecurity and blew it up into that grotesque obsession with grafting body parts. They took Rykard's ambition and pushed him into heresy, feeding himself to a giant snake. They took Radagon's pride and turned it into this reckless need for glory.
The war spiraled quickly then. But the real climax, the point of no return, was Caelid, right? The duel between Radagon and Malenia.
The two mightiest generals, yeah. And that duel, it didn't end with a winner. It ended in this bloody, catastrophic stalemate that scarred the entire region forever.
Oh.
Malenia, apparently facing defeat, unleashed the Scarlet Ionia, the full power of her wrought curse.
Oh, wow. The explosion of decay just ravaged Caelid, drove Radagon completely insane, left him fighting the stars in the desert, and put Malenia herself into a deep, coma-like slumber.
And this is where your analysis comes in. This wasn't just a tragedy that got out of hand. You think the shattering was engineered.
It looks like a manufactured stalemate.
Yeah.
Deliberately set up by Marika. By giving these powerful shards to her deeply flawed, cursed children, knowing their amplified flaws would drive them against each other, she basically ensured no single winner could emerge.
She wanted them to fight to a standstill, to tear the old order apart from within, creating a vacuum.
Exactly, which led to the interregnum, this long age where the world just sat there, broken, stagnant. Common people couldn't die properly, turned into husks. The surviving demigods were trapped by madness or curses or just fear. Everything was still ruined. Perfect conditions for the next phase.
The final stage of Marika's centuries-long plan. The lands between are broken, the demigods are abandoned by the silent greater will, and now the guidance of Greece reaches out. Reaches across the sea, yeah, to the exiled Tarnished, the dead who yet live.
Her army in exile, called back home.
They are the external agents of change. Resurrected, called back specifically to gather the great runes, slay the corrupted demigods, and forge a new destiny. They are the weapon Marika commissioned centuries ago.
To ensure that when the order finally collapsed, a force existed outside the stagnant system, hardened by real death, real separation, ready to break the whole cycle and impose new rules.
It makes the Tarnished player character's journey the ultimate fulfillment of this incredibly long, bitter plan by an imprisoned god queen who realized she was just a cog in a machine run by nobody.
She decided to burn it all down just to get out.
Yeah, and just to quickly put that family tragedy into perspective, you can really see the conflict playing out across three main bloodlines, all fighting over the same broken inheritance.
Right. First generation, Marika and Godfrey. They had the Golden Boy, Godwyn, and then the secret Omen twins, Morgott and Malg, locked away. The irony being that Morgott, the Omen King, ends up being the only one actually trying to protect the capital and the memory of the Order.
Such a tragic figure. Then you have the Carrarian connection. Radagon Marika's other half had a political marriage with Rennala, the Carrarian queen.
Which produced Radon, Rykard, and Ranni.
Exactly. Not strictly golden lineage by blood, but pulled into the Order's power structure through that alliance, which of course eventually leads to massive conflict between the Carrarian royal family and the Erdtree followers.
And finally, the ultimate symbol of the Order's internal failure, Miquella and Malenia, born from that impossible union of Marika and Radagon as one being.
Empyreans, yes, but cursed from birth. Miquella with eternal youth, Malenia with the scarlet rot, the deepest tragedy born from the deepest, most paradoxical unity.
And then poor Godric the Grafted, just a distant descendant, clearly crushed by insecurity, his rune just amplifying that into what he became.
Yeah. The whole war is basically step-siblings and half-siblings, all bearing the scars and curses of the system Marika built and then deliberately shattered. Hashtag tag outro.
So, wrapping this up, we've basically tracked the entire history of the Lambs through these maybe inevitable phases. First, that primordial fracture, the one great shattering and the divine abandonment. Second, Marika's trauma response, leading to her conquest, her obsession with purity, and the sealing of death.
And third, the radical, meticulously planned destruction of her own stagnant order, culminating in the shattering war.
Yeah. It seems the Golden Order's fatal flaw wasn't really external threats. It was its own internal contradictions, its inability to cope with complexity, with real death, after Marika tried to seal it all away.
She tried to replace the chaotic, messy reality of existence with this controlled, perfect, unblemished eternity. And that sterile environment just decayed, rotted from within until she had no choice but to call in the Tarnished, the demolition crew.
The arrival of the Tarnished feels like the final necessary step in correcting that original mistake the Frenzied Flame talks about, maybe not by melting everything, but by breaking the flawed system. They're the ultimate weapon, but they're also just mortals choosing what comes next.
Which leads us to that final provocative thought for you, the listener, to chew on. If the goal here is ultimate freedom from an absent God's control, from these cycles, can a truly free world actually be forged when the very process of achieving it was a controlled demolition, engineered by a bitter, imprisoned predecessor?
What new set of rules will the Tarnished, will you impose on this broken world? And maybe more cynically, given the history we've just laid out, the Dragon Dynasty, Marika's own rule, what are the chances that the Tarnished Lord simply starts the whole cycle over again? Another imposed order, another eventual abandonment?